Hi everybody, Jake here for FMSCOUT, and I think I speak for most Football Manager players when I say a very infuriating part of FM is where you find a Wonderkid and you realise he's already been snapped up by a big club and you just wonder, why didn't my scouts pick up on this guy? Well, in today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys a tutorial on the best ways to scout and how to almost cast an invincible net around the whole of world football so that no Wonderkid will slip through and get signed by PSG every single time. So with that being said, let's get right into it and I hope you enjoyed the video. Hello everyone, Jake here for FMSCOUT, and as I mentioned in that intro, today's video is all about scouting and how to get the best out of your scouting network, your scouts, and to hopefully bring in as many Wonderkids or whatever kind of player you're trying to sign into your team without missing out on them, without any of them slipping through your scouting network's net. But before we get into it, I'd just like to ask you guys if you could really help us out by smashing that like button. It really does mean a lot. It helps spread the videos out way more than you could imagine, and it's great for the algorithm. So if you want to do that and help us out, that would be great. Drop a comment down below your favourite nations to scout, and if you have any scouting tips or methods that I don't mention, drop them in the comments, and this can be like the ultimate scouting video. When we come onto it, everyone can get tips and ideas on how to best scout. And finally, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell on the FMSCOUT channel. Very close to 130,000 subscribers, so if you can help us get there, we will be more than grateful. But scouting, what is it? How does it work? Let's start with the basics and we'll advance it as we go through. So, starting very basic, we are in our staff section here with Wolfsburg. If you want to check out my Wolfsburg save, it's on my channel, linked in the description, getting close to 6,000 subscribers, so if you want to help us out on there, that would be great. But as you can see here, in the staff section, you have your recruitment team, made up majorly of scouts and recruitment analysts. Of course, the job of a scout is to go around world football and show you some players you might find potentially interesting and could potentially sign for your guys' sides. The important attributes for the scout are the obvious ones highlighted here of judging player ability and judging player potential, but the amount of times that people forget about adaptability is a joke really. So if your coach is not adaptable, when he moves over to a different country, he's not going to do as well. So if you sign a Colombian scout for your Premier League team and he has free adaptability, he's going to find it harder to settle in and scout people in England, for example, whereas this coach here will do a very good job because he has very high adaptability. If you want a full description, you can read it, but you get the idea. Every single scout has a set of scouting knowledge, so that's based on where they know most about. So for example here, Christopher Remp we've got as a Wolfsburg scout. He has great knowledge in Germany, which is obviously a great bonus. We are a German club. He also has great knowledge of France and Belgium, and this will contribute to your overall scouting network's world knowledge too. But this is an important thing to note, as for example here, if we went and sent Christopher Remp, and I'll show you how to do it later, but if we sent him to Iraq to find some players, he doesn't have great knowledge of Iraq, only 1%, and therefore it's going to take him a longer time to find a Wonderkid, let's say, because he's got to learn the nation, figure out the players there first, and he'll have to scout the whole nation in order to find a player. Whereas if he has knowledge of France, for example, he might know where to look, what academies to look at, what players are already there, and therefore you're likely to get better scouting results at a quicker rate. It's very simple. That is a scout. Now for the video's example, I've reset my scouting team and we're going to set it up ourselves in the way that I think is the best way to do it, particularly if you're doing a long-term save. Don't get me wrong, there is no right or wrong way really. If you want to be the person that lets someone else take control of your scouting, whether it be your director of football or your chief scout, let them do it. They will still return you results of good players, bad players too, but the way to hone that down if you want to and don't want to go into the full detail of assigning your scouts is you go to this tab here and you can kind of narrow their focus down a little bit. So for example, if I was to do it, I'd be looking for young players, and this limit means that they won't look to bring too many scout reports of players over the age of 26, and that's pretty simple. It's a way that you can narrow it down if you don't want to do too much work. Your scouting budget is how much money your scouting team has. If we go back to the example of a scout in Iraq, it's going to cost him a lot of money to travel, money for a hotel, and these fees do add up. Usually the further away from home you go, the more scouting budget it does take up, but it is all from your transfer budget, so you can just adjust it to have a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on what you need and how intensive your scouting team is. So if you do have someone in charge of your scouts, they'll be sending them on assignments based on leagues, nations, whatever it might be, and you can improve your scouting team either by going to the board, or you can click in this section here. It's in the Club Vision screen as well, but there is an option here, and it isn't there for me right now because I've done it very recently, where you ask for more scouts. And I would always say get as many scouts as possible. Obviously depending on your club's level, that's going to vary, but you get the general gist of it. Now, here is what I think is the best way to do it, my favourite way, and the way that I think most players who do long-term saves and have been around FM for a while will tell you how to do it, and that is to take control of scouting assignments yourself. So if we do this, we are now in charge of our scouting assignments, and I think really we need to get rid of all these assignments, so let me get rid of them and we'll start with a blank slate. Okay, so here we are with our scouting team. We have 10 scouts, I think it is. Across the board, it's a pretty decent scouting team. There's some that maybe aren't as at a high level, but a lot of them are in good areas for judging potential ability and judging current ability, which is what you want for a scout. Obviously, it all depends what you're looking for, but when I create a scout assignment, I'm not looking for all that much in terms of filters. I basically just go by age, which you can get by just selecting additional conditions here and saying age is, I don't know, at most 23. If you were looking for a youngster, you might want to go to 21, and that's a good place to start. But obviously you don't want every single player under the age of 21 to be picked up, so then you go to scouting potential ability. If you wanted to do Wonderkids at least, obviously you can tweak this depending on what you are looking for in your team, but if you are after a Wonderkid, this is basically your star rating. So this is 5-star, this is 4.5 star, 4-star, 3.5 star, you get the idea, all the way down. So realistically, you probably wouldn't want your scouts bringing back anyone from, 4 stars or less. So in this case, I'll ask for superb or higher. Now, if you want to break this down even further, you can ask for them to have a current ability rating of maybe 1 or 2 stars, so you know that they're not just all potential and no talent. You can even ask for determination to be at a certain high level, if you don't want a Wonderkid with under 10 determination to come in, for example. If you want to play a certain system and you need work rate, you can filter on that. But I think it's best to keep it as simple as possible and work from there. There are other ways that you can quickly narrow your search. For example, you can ask for players that only fit your tactic. For example, here at Wolfsburg, we play a diamond, so the chances of them bringing back a winger or a left midfielder, because it's a narrow diamond, are very slim. And up here, you can ask for a player type straight away. So if you're after a first team player straight away, you can do that. Hot prospect tends to work, but I think it's better just to narrow it down to exactly what you want, and that will stop all the rubbish scout reports coming through. On top of that as well, if you have a player in mind that you want to have a player similar to, for example, if I knew that we were going to sell Maximilian Arnold, it will then look for players who have similar attributes to what Arnold would have. So if you're about to lose him in the transfer market, let's say, you can replace him in that way. But if we reset it to what we originally had, there we go, we've reset it back to the basic search that we did have. And now comes a part where you're going to have to use your own judgment, and I think most Football Manager players will be able to do this if you're experienced. If not, you're just going to have to get used to it. It's the way that things will work, and that's your scope. So this is where you're wanting to search. Now, you can do it by league. For example, you can send a scout to the Portuguese First Division, whatever you might want to do. I prefer region scouting the most. I think that's the best way over a long-term save to, as Zealand calls it, and this is very much inspired by Zealand's content, so thank you to him, wire the world, he calls it basically. So you want to know every single player that comes through in every single area. Obviously, that's harder to do the smaller the scouting team you have, the smaller your club's reputation. And this is where I say a bit of Football Manager experience comes in, because if you're managing in non-league in England, for example, you're not going to have the scouts or the scouting budget, if you even have a scout, to go to the likes of North America, to South America, to find Brazilian Wonderkids. The chances are you'll want to learn about the divisions around you, the lower league English divisions, maybe Scotland, Ireland, them kind of nations. So then instead of scouting a whole region that's going to cost you a lot of money, you might go and scout, for example, the Scottish second division by competition, or the nation of Scotland on its own, whatever you might want to do. That's where you're going to have to think for your own right. And it's the same with if you were, for example, a championship team. You might not want to search in the Premier League and the French First Division. You might want to go for some bargain players in Scandinavian nations like Norway, Denmark, Sweden, or you've got Croatia if you go outside of the Scandinavian nations. They're always good for a good cheap youngster, and it stops those rubbish scout reports coming in where a scout brings you back an £100 million player and you're just like, what am I going to do with this? I'm Accrington Stanley, what am I meant to do? But once your team gets to a fairly good level and you have a fair few scouts on board, then it comes down to which regions you're going to scout. Now, each region consists of a few different nations, but some of them, as you are going to guess, are more prolific for producing Wonderkids. I'm not going to list every single one and which is the best nation. However, I think all of you will agree that there's been less Caribbean Wonderkid superstars than there has been ones from Brazil, for example. And in-game, this is reflected to the same reasons that is the case in real life. That there's not the footballing infrastructure, the clubs, the facilities, the interest of football. And as we know in Football Manager, you have youth facilities, youth recruitment, junior academy coaching. The more clubs they are with a higher standard of those things in a certain nation, the more chance of them producing a Wonderkid. It makes perfect sense, and there's a reason why some regions are better than others. So as a chief scout, as you basically are when you're setting all these scouts, what you're aiming to do is just know everything about a nation. So whenever a Wonderkid crops up over the course of your 5-10 year save, whatever it might be, you know about it, and then you can make the decision first. Are we going to get this guy? Are we going to let him develop here? Are we just not going to want him at all? And the way you do that is very simple. You choose your region. Again, depending on your scouts and your team's level, it depends on what regions you're going to choose. Playing as Wolfsburg here, again, you can check that save out in the description on my channel if you want to. We don't have the world's most money, but I reckon we could spend up to £10 million on a player, and therefore most Brazilian, Argentinian Wonderkids should come under that bracket, particularly when new regions are formed. So you would go to the South America South. That region consists of the likes of Brazil and Argentina, or for example, if you didn't want to go for that region, you could go to South America North, which has some cheaper nations like Colombia, Peru, all of which do produce some very good Wonderkids. But if we go for South America South, we now have an instruction to tell our scouts to go there and look for players under the age of 21 whose potential is at least 4 stars compared to the level of our club. Now, there's a few extra things you can do, and I think you should do if you're doing a long-term save and you don't want to move your scouts around. If you know you're always going to have a scout in South America, set it to ongoing. That way, the assignment won't cancel at a random point. They'll keep checking there, keep learning more, developing your knowledge of a nation, and over time, as your knowledge builds up, you'll have more chance of spotting them Wonderkids. Furthermore, if you leave it to your scouting pool, it will just pick a random scout and choose them to go and look in Brazil. But you can narrow this down if you want to, taking into account their adaptability and their other scouting attributes. You can also, if you want to go even deeper, find a scout that maybe already knows a little bit about Brazil and Argentina and send them there, because then they've already got a good knowledge of the area and they're not building up from scratch. So you can do all of that when setting your scouting assignments. Now, if you did this with, let's say you had 10 scouts like we do here, Wolfsburg aren't the world's biggest club, but obviously they are in a top division and they're one of the most reputable clubs in that division, so 10 scouts is plenty. We'd probably want to look in Southern Europe, in your Croatian regions and that kind of thing. We'd like to look in our area as well where Germany is. We probably would send people to Scandinavia, to Spain, to Portugal, all of these regions. If you just cover the most of European regions, you'll be fine. Then we probably double down with our other 4 or 5 scouts we'd have left over, have someone checking out the South American regions, maybe one in one area of Africa and Asia. If we want to pick up some, for example, South Korean Wonderkids seem to come about a lot more than you might think they would do, so that might be something that we look for. Of course, if you're a Vanarama North non-league team, you might be looking in UK and Ireland really for players, but if I was you, I'd just, like I said earlier, specify it down to a single nation to save yourself some money and just to locate players specifically that you're going to be able to buy. So if you did that with all of your scouts, over time they'd start to build up a scouting knowledge, and over time your scouts will know loads more about the footballing world, about the players coming through, and you can always check that by going to the knowledge section, and you can see where you have great knowledge in green. Yellow knowledge is obviously not as high, and then you've got your red knowledge, which basically means you don't know much, and then the grey knowledge, you basically know nothing at all. If we were doing region-based scouting, you'd start to see the knowledge of the regions going up slowly, and at the same time, of course, the nation's knowledge will be going up at the same time too, as they do come hand in hand. If you wanted to know a little bit more about what region a nation is in, you can always just click on it and find out. For example, Germany here is in this section, which I imagine is going to be Central Europe. Yeah, there you go. If you wanted to check out North America, you can do that. If you wanted to see what consisted of East Asia, you can go look at that as well and figure out whether it's worth sending scouts to that region. So as you can see, once you break scouting down into its individual parts, it's very simple and isn't as time consuming as you might think. I know a lot of people who I know that play Football Manager fairly casually don't do this, don't set their own scouts, because basically they can't be bothered, they don't see the impact of it. But I assure you, if you do a long-term save and compare the players that you found through scouting using the region scouting and just letting your director of football bring back certain players based on their age or something, you're going to have very big differences, I assure you of that. And it's definitely not a bad thing improving this world of knowledge, getting your scouts all over the world and finding the best talent for your guys' sides. So in this video, we've covered the basics of scouting and how to have full knowledge of the world so you miss as little Wonderkids in your Wonderkid net as possible. But there are of course many little scouting tips and tricks that you can find. We've made videos on that so far already on FM22, which you can find out. For example, just clicking on a player, you might not think about it, but if you went to Yusuf Amin here and you wanted to find a player who had similar attributes to him, you can just click on comparison, find similar players, and all of a sudden it brings you back a list of players who have similar key attributes to him. There are plenty of little scouting tips like that that you can pick up and find, and if you have any of them, don't forget to drop them in the comments. Hopefully newer Football Manager players have got some use out of this video, and you more experienced guys are also understanding a little bit more about the best ways to scout if you didn't already know, and maybe it just refreshed your mind and made you think, you know what, I should send my scouts out. Whatever it might be, I hope you have enjoyed the video, guys. Like the video if you did, subscribe to the channel for more. Feel free to check out my channel linked in the description if you want to watch our Wolfsburg save. I hope you all have a great day and a great new year, and I'll see you next time, guys. Goodbye.